Starting recording now. Okay. So before I go into anything on the screen, let me actually just open something empty that is not going to distract us. Okay. So ignore what's on the screen for now. Before I talk about the test in this case, just in general, tests are meant to like validate different things in your code. So in this case, we're doing smart contract functions, but most programming languages have testing frameworks that make it easy to, test specific functionality in a function, or test two different functions calling each other, or, testing API integrations. And so in this case, we're doing what's called a unit test. And you can think of a unit test as the smallest unit of tests that you can have. So like if you're working with Python, you can say have a function that adds two numbers, and then a unit test for that would be verifying that it adds two numbers correctly. And that's usually the simplest case. So what we're doing here is we have this easy store contract that has some functions inside of it, some variables, also some inheritance. And what the tests are doing are you're essentially verifying behavior. And the way you do that in Solidity, there's a couple of ways. One is using Foundry's test suite. Hard Hat is the other popular option. In the case of why we're using Foundry is because Foundry lets you write tests in Solidity, whereas Hard Hat, you have to write your test in JavaScript or TypeScript. So yeah, I guess from that high level overview of what tests are in general, do you have any questions before I dive into this contract specifically?
Nope. Explained it perfect.
Awesome. So in this case, what this homework assignment is doing, and what we're trying to build a pattern of, is being comfortable writing tests and interacting with contracts to test functionality. Because you can find a lot of vulnerabilities, or even just get a better understanding of protocol by being able to write tests to like verify stuff. So you're not guessing about, oh, I think this is how it's working. You can write a test to validate it. So in this case, what we're doing here is we create, for every test we want to have, we create a new contract that inherits this test class that's provided by Foundry. And what this test class does is it lets you write tests, and you can also have assertions. And this is not something that's specific to Foundry. Generally, when you're running tests, so like for example here, I was just running the tests in these files. You can see that it actually ran through. You can see that they're passing. It gives you some information about them. This is a pretty, I would say, common view of what test frameworks do in any programming language. And the reason you do this is so that if you come at some point in the future to change functionality and you maybe break some old functionality, your test will fail and you'll be able to be aware of that. Whereas if you don't have those tests, your code base is kind of up in the air at any point, and you don't know if you change one thing here, how that will affect other things. So yeah.
Okay, got you.
And were you able to actually try and run any of the tests, like running the Forge or Foundry command line?
Nah, I didn't. I stopped that right before I got to the part where I was going to run the test, because I don't know why I didn't want to like mess up everything. So I don't know. Maybe after this session, I'll just go ahead and like try to work through things and just as I fail through it and come back and ask questions. I kind of wanted to get a better understanding before I kick started
Yeah,
actually trying to write.
that makes sense. Uh, yeah. So in terms of running tests, one of the mental hurdles I had to go through was something similar where it was like, I would get just like a weird reaction whenever I would like see red or like stuff would break. But when you're writing tests, things are going to be broken more often than not while you're building it. And so just getting comfortable, just like, making a change, running your tests, making a change, running your tests, and being okay with it failing and stuff breaking. That's a part of the process of putting them together. And that's how you start to debug what's going on. Because if you try and run a test and it fails, generally the Solidity compiler or Foundry, the framework, will tell you why it's failing. So you can kind of iterate on that. Okay, so I think to go through this, we can just go through the first one here. So I'm just going to open up the Easy Store contract on the left here, and then the test file on the right. I would say the two different ways you're, I guess, verifying the test in this case is either doing a console log. So like in this test, for example, it's just, hey, what is the number what number is stored there? And being able to read that. And that's something you can do with a console log. The other type of test, which is more common, and console logging is very common too, but when you're writing proof of concept as an auditor, but also as a developer, when you're writing tests, you'll have something called assertions. So assertions are what you see here, where it's like a pass or fail. And so in this case,
my bad to cut you off. I'm not seeing the share screen.
Oh,
I'm not sure if you're aware.
Let's see.
I didn't see anything, or we haven't seen anything.
Oh, sorry about that.
Good.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can see it now.
Okay. So what I was talking about earlier with the, like, what a test looks like when you run it. The output will look something like this. So you have some pass or some fail. And like I was mentioning, the two types of tests. In this case, one, there's tests where you're just trying to read information that's there. So what I'm doing here is reading a variable from the contract and then printing it to the console. So that's how you see this value here. The other type of tests, which I was saying is usually more common when you're building stuff and when you're building proof of concepts, is assertions. And what assertions are doing is it's a check, and it's either a pass or a fail. So in this case, what this test is doing is it's updating a variable inside this contract and then verifying that that variable is updated to the new number. And so when you see this assert, in this case it's assert equal, but you can also have assertions for other cases like assert failure. So if you expect something to fail, you can do that as well. So a lot of the tests that you would be writing here are going to be assertions where you make some change and you want to verify that that change happened the way you expect. If that makes sense. Anyone have any questions on that or other thoughts they wanted to go through? Cool. If there were any other questions, I guess have you had a chance to read through the Easy Store contract yet, just to try and get a sense of what was going on?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the only other I think helpful tool is the actual CLI command when you're running tests.
Mm.
And so the way you actually run tests is with you run forge test. But one of the most important options you have is dash V. And V stands for verbosity. And what it's telling you is like how much detail do you want about your test. So if I run this test here, for example, with, I think there's 4 levels. So if I just run it with the first one, you'll see that I'll get, you know, these tests passed, how much gas they're using, but not much more detail than that. If I were to do 2 Vs, run those same tests, now you see the actual log, console log that I was using, whereas you didn't see that before. And if you actually run it with the highest level, it has a lot more information. So this level of detail is very helpful for really understanding what's happening, because for each of these tests, you're actually seeing the call stack of what's actually being executed. Yeah, and you can also see the events that are emitted, and so you just have much more detail on what's happening. So if you're ever trying to debug a test, using that triple V flag is very helpful. I think that's the only other really important thing to do. Cool. So let me stop sharing there. Awesome.
I guess I had a question for challenge 7. So we're trying to update the secret message. So what I was thinking was I was gonna do like ABI encode the string into bytes and then compare the local variable of like the newly updated message and like the unit test, and then compare it to the state variable of the private variable from the source contract. Do you think that would like, is that the right way to go about it?
I think that's a good way if you want to be like super explicit, like to have an actual test. I think in this case, we were looking for something just like being able to call the right method. But you're right, if you want to actually like, because it's a private variable, you could read it directly from storage. Another approach, if you wanted to modify this contract, would to be add a getter, but I think if you want to actually have that assertion, you would read from storage. In this challenge here, we're looking for just being able to change it, not necessarily read it.
Okay.
But that if you're interested in just getting more practice with storage, then yeah, that's something you could try, because if you work with storage before, it wouldn't be that crazy to do.
Okay, sounds good. I'll give it a try.
And if you haven't worked with Foundry much, Foundry has a one of their libraries they provide make it really easy to read the storage of a contract.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
If you haven't worked much with Foundry, I think there's a API they provide to easily like retrieve storage slots from a contract.
Oh, okay, I see. Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Be a little bit simpler. Cool. Yeah, if anyone else has any questions, I'll be here. I'm actually writing tests for my job right now as well, so that's what I'll be doing in the background. No one is asking anything. my tester and hard hat though, so